All right, so as we get ready to read our next class book, I wanted to do a little introduction to help you build some background and then also thinking about the author's purpose. So the book is titled Night, and we will talk about the symbolism of that title as we get into the book. It is a memoir. Memoirs are a historical account or biography. So, in other words, this is the real story, the real memories of our author, Elie Wiesel, who is a Holocaust survivor. So, it's a firsthand account of what he experienced during the Holocaust. And so, Elie is a boy. Elie is short for Elijah, so please don't call him she. He's a he. He was born September 30th, 1928. So, using that context, thinking about our timeline, he was born about 5 years before Hitler came to power. And he would have been about 10 when Hitler started to invade and World War II started. Elie was born in Siet, Romania. And so you can see I have a little map here. Here's Siet, right up on the corner border, there's the word I want, of Romania. And so to put that in context for you of Europe for you, here's Czechoslovakia, here's Poland. Germany would be right over here. So a couple countries separate Romania from Germany, and that'll be important as we get into the book. And so this is an excerpt from the introduction. I'm not going to read the entire introduction, but I feel there is some important information that he puts in the introduction. We read a different version than the other classes do because I feel it's important that we read most recent translation. So he wrote this book in his native language, not English. And so when it was published and was published in different languages, somebody had to go through and translate. And the most recent translation was done by his daughter. So if you just kind of think and rationalize, okay, somebody like his daughter who knows him that well, she's going to be able to better translate and get the exact right word that he is trying to express. And as we will see in this introduction, Elie talks about the struggle of finding the right words. How do you describe something so horrific and so horrible? Words just don't even seem to do it. And so just reading the two translations, I feel the one that we're going to read is much better than the other. So I would like you to follow along and listen as I read the parts of the introduction that I think are important. There's going to be some questions you have to answer, especially around author's purpose and author's craft, okay? If in my lifetime I was to write only one book, this would be the one. Just as the past lingers in the present, all my writings after Night, including those that deal with biblical, Talmudic, or Hasidic themes, so religious, profoundly bear its stamp and cannot be understood if one has not read this very first of my works. So everything he writes about religion, you can't understand if you haven't read about his personal experience during the Holocaust. Why did I write it? Did I write it so as not to go mad, or on the contrary, to go mad in order to understand the nature of madness, the immense, terrifying madness that erupted in history and the conscience of mankind? So mad again here doesn't mean angry, it means like crazy, like what is happening in the world. Was it to leave behind a legacy of words, of memories, to help prevent history from repeating itself? Or was it simply to preserve a record of the ordeal I endured as an adolescent, at an age when one's knowledge of death and evil should be limited to what one discovers in literature? There are those who tell me that I survived in order to write this text. I am not convinced. I don't know how I survived. I was weak, rather shy. I did nothing to save myself. A miracle? Certainly not. If heaven could or would perform a miracle for me, why not for others more deserving than myself? It was nothing more than chance. However, having survived, I needed to give some meaning to my survival. Was it to protect that meaning that I set to paper an experience in which nothing made any sense? In retrospect, I must confess that I do not know or no longer know what I wanted to achieve with my words. I only knew that without this testimony, my life as a writer, or my life period, would not have become what it is. That of a witness who believes he has a moral obligation to try to prevent the enemy from enjoying one last victory by allowing his crimes to be erased from human memory. So he's telling us his purpose there. He needs to bear witness to what happened. because there are people that deny that the Holocaust ever happened, that this didn't really exist. Elie was there. He's saying, this is what I saw. For today, thanks to recently discovered documents, evidence shows that in the early days of their ascension to power, the Nazis in Germany set out to build a society in which there simply would be no room for Jews. For the end of their reign, their goal changed. They decided to leave behind a world in ruins in which Jews would seem never to have existed. And that is why everywhere in Russia, the Ukraine, Lithuania, the Einsatzgruppen carried out the final solution by turning their machine guns on more than 1 million Jews, men, women, and children, and throwing them into huge mass graves, moments before by the victims themselves. Special units would then discover the corpses and burn them. Thus, for the first time in history, Jews were not only killed twice, but denied burial in a cemetery. It is obvious that the war which Hitler and his accomplices waged was a war not against Jewish men, women, and children, but also against Jewish religion, Jewish culture, Jewish tradition, and therefore Jewish memory. Convinced that this period in history would be judged one day, I knew I must bear witness. And I also knew that while I had many things to say, I did not have the words to say them. Painfully aware of my limitations, I watched helplessly as language became an obstacle. It became clear that it would be necessary to invent a new language. But how is one to rehabilitate and transform words betrayed and perverted by the enemy? Hunger, thirst, fear, transport, selection, fire, chimney. These words all have intrinsic meaning, but in those times they meant something else. Writing in my mother tongue, at that point close to extinction, I would pause at every sentence and start over and over again. I would conjure up other verbs, other images, other silent cries. It still was not right. But what exactly was it? It was something elusive, darkly shrouded for fear of being usurped, profaned. All the dictionary had to offer seemed meager, pale, lifeless. Was there a way to describe the last journey in sealed cattle cars? The last voyage toward the unknown? Or the discovery of a demented and glacial universe where to be inhuman was human, where disciplined, educated men in uniform came to kill, and innocent children and weary old men came to die? Or the countless separations on a single fiery night, the tearing apart of entire families, entire communities, or incredibly, the vanishing of a beautiful, well-behaved little Jewish girl with golden hair and a sad smile, murdered with her mother the very night of her arrival. How is one to speak of them without trembling and a heart broken for all eternity? So he's kind of previewing some of the things he'll talk about. The little girl and her mother he's talking about is his sister and his mother, who were killed the first night at Auschwitz. How do you find the words to describe the horror that he lived through? Deep down, the witness knew then, as he does now, that his testimony would not be received. After all, it deals with an event that sprang from the darkest zone of man. Only those who experience Auschwitz know what it was. Others will never know. But would they at least understand? Could men and women who consider it normal to assist the weak, to heal the sick, to protect the young, and respect the wisdom of their elders understand what happened there? Would they be able to comprehend how, within this cursed universe, the masters tortured the weak, massacred the children, the sick, the old? And yet, having lived through this experience, one could not keep silent no matter how difficult, not impossible it was to speak. And so I persevered and trusted the silence that envelopes and transcends words, knowing all the while that any one of the field of ashes in Birkenau carries more weight than all the testimonies about Birkenau. For despite all my attempts to articulate the unspeakable, it is still not right. And then jumping ahead to the final part of the introduction. Before concluding this introduction, I believe it important to emphasize how strongly I feel that books, just like people, have a destiny. Some invite sorrow, others joy, some both. Earlier, I described the difficulties encountered by Knight before its publication in French 47 years ago. Despite overwhelmingly favorable reviews, the book sold poorly. The subject was considered morbid and interested no one. If a rabbi happened to mention the book in his sermon, there was always people ready to complain it was senseless to burden our children with the tragedies of the Jewish past. Since then, much has changed. That has been received in ways that I never expected.